So, Anna.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm really pleased and excited to be here. First, because this new research project I'm going to talk about was directly inspired by the work here being done by Riitta and others. And secondly, because this is really the first time I present more coherently these new ideas. So the question is not rhetorical, and I am not going to answer it, but I hope this will be an opportunity for us all to think about this and brainstorm and suggest things. My own background is in family sociology, and as it was said, I come from the Population Research Institute. It's a small institute based in Helsinki, a bit like the CPC. I noticed that we study many of the same things that we study in the CPC. So currently I myself am divided between studies of fertility and childbearing and the transition to parenthood, and then studies on aging and intergenerational relations, which I will talk about here. When I looked at the very nice CPC webpage, I was really surprised how many themes we have in common. And I guess the only theme we are not currently involved in Finland is constitutional crisis, which we don't have, unfortunately. Otherwise, many trends are the same. The Population Research Institute has given at least 2 gifts to European demography. One is Wolfgang Lutz, who famously wrote his PhD in our cellar on Finnish fertility. And the other one is Heini Väisänen, who started as a coordinator in our project. And I remember sitting there and she was, oh yeah, should I go to London for 1 year? And we were just, yeah, that's a good idea, you'll get some fresh ideas. And there she went, and here she stayed. So you are lucky to have her, and we miss her a lot in Finland. And thank you, Heini, for arranging this whole trip here. Okay. This new project I'm embarking on is called Partnership Transitions in Older Age. And immediately to show you, here's an 80-year-old couple in the Journal of Lapland called Lapland's People. The headline says, her phone rang in the middle of a ski track, and within a few weeks they were already engaged because her former love from the older days had called her. So very Finnish, you are skiing, as every middle-aged and older Finnish woman does, cross-country skiing, and then if you have a mobile phone, we are very digitalized, and they call and they look very happy, as you see. In this project, we will be using 2 main data sets, both which are coordinated at my institution. One is the Finnish part of the big survey of health, aging and retirement in Europe, SHARE. I guess that's a familiar data set to many of you. And the other one is generational transmissions in Finland, which was started when Finland was not part of SHARE in the beginning. It's a bit different, but also concerns intergenerational relations. I will here not talk about the SHARE data because for Finland it's still very raw. And we haven't done, we are just beginning the analysis with SHARE data, but tell you something about one study we already did with the generational transmissions data. So in this, the research project we are embarking on, we have 3 parts. Can you see the fonts to the back? Yeah, otherwise, and if you don't follow me, just say, okay? One is, as we know, many interesting things are going on in partnerships in old age. And actually this whole project started when I was Googling remarital rates among 50 plus, trying to see something, and then I noticed there wasn't actually any data on remarriages, even remarriages. And then we know there's much else. There's computation, there's dating, there's I have been much using the typology that Brenna and colleagues developed for various European countries related to how you transition from different forms of partnerships. But that ends when they are, I think, 45 or 50 or something. So here we thought, oh yeah, it would be cool to do it for the older things. And we plan to use especially shared data here for that. But I will not talk about that part. The other point is the associations between partnership transitions and other family and social relations. Using the longitudinal data I mentioned. Here we use a life course approach, which I guess is very familiar. How many of you know about or use the life course approach? Okay, I assumed it would be everybody. Then also, theoretically, I am really interested in just thinking about this whole point. Why do older people fall in love? What is the function of pair bonds, couples, where no children can be born? Why do we have the capacity to fall in love? Why do we, or do we all have it? Do we want to fall in love? Do we fall in love? What happens? How do we want to formalize the relationship when even the potential of childbearing is clearly over? And here I will use an evolutionary life history approach. How many of you are familiar with the life history theory approaches? No, okay, this is fine. Okay, Sam, good. I will briefly talk about it here. So here I will give some general trends about remarriage, what we know, and two examples from especially remarriage in midlife and older age. Now, it's very interesting that in the social sciences we have life course theory, in the biological sciences we have life history theory. They are both interested in the life course, and there are many similarities, and I have worked during the last 5 to 8 years in kind of combining these and merging these. It's sometimes easy and sometimes not. Basically, life history theory is a theory for all living species and organisms. And it's about the allocation of energy and resources during the lifespan. It's about how much growth each species or each individual puts into various things. Usually first you are born and you try to survive and you grow. Then you reach maturity and you reproduce. If you're a species with parenting, you parent and you raise the children. And then at some point you died, and I forgot to mention before, having the children you usually have to find and have a mate. So growth, somatic maintenance, mating efforts, and then reproduction and parenting efforts. In life history theory, one of the main ideas is that energy and resources and time is always limited, so you have to do trade-offs. And you have to think, what do I kind of focus on in my trajectory? And these trade-offs may vary. And of course, we are not talking always about conscious trade-offs, but of behavior. A typical trade-off is, do you have many offspring but invest little in them, or do you have few offspring and invest much in them? And here, humans are of course a high investing species with few offspring, and also within human populations we have variations. We know that with a number of children, many of the child outcomes are worse, child survival is worse, child cognitive development is worse. So that's a classical type of a trade-off which humans face, is how many children you have and how much you invest in them. And that actually then also goes to the remarriage, the question of when to divorce and when to remarry, and in what sense it pays off from a fertility point of view also. I will return to this, but first, to get you back into the topic, some things of where we go in Finland. I want to tell you the story of two women who wrote to me about their experiences of love in old age. The first is called Riitta, and now I'm really sorry, you probably can't see it there. It's hard with these PowerPoints, but I will read it out. She's now 79 years old. She said that she married young and lived for 25 years in a very hard and heavy marriage. Now I wonder how I could stand it at all. My childhood home was good, my father was reliable and so on, but then I met the totally wrong kinds of guys. Later, after the divorce, I wished to find a male friend, but I never again planned for a shared daily life. I had 2 longer relationships, one for 3.5 years, one for even 7 years. And then comes the story which she wants to tell. I have a small garden cottage, and this is not a class thing in Finland. The majority has some kind of garden cottage. It's a thing the population does. In the summer of 2004, a man came biking on the road and stopped to talk. I thought, what a pleasant man. I got some background information from the village. He lived with his old mother, had a friend, clearly a woman friend, for 23 years. She had died 9 years ago. Now came the most important. He had a big boat, and I had a lifelong dream to go out on a boat. For a year, I let the thought mature. Then on Easter Saturday 2005, I called him and asked if he would take me out with the boat in the summer. I was 66, he was 68. That's how it started. First a one-day tour, and then in June already for several days. Fresh smoked perch and other wonderful things. First midsummer together after so many midsummers alone. Midsummers are also a big thing in Finland. It's like the reverse of Christmas, but then there's light, so it's nice. It's already 13 years since that call, and still I can value each day. He is to me a gift from heaven and the son of my life. And then she also actually really nicely describes what they do. Well, like they go shopping, they live separately, saunas together on Saturdays and Sundays, and when she goes to the cottage, she can always go to his house, and it's a very nice. And they travel to Thailand every year, which is again tells you something about the living of well-being, because she's clearly not very well educated or something. I don't know too much. Yeah, they travel. Okay, the other story is Anna, who is now 70 years. She starts by saying, I have maybe been too quick with finding new relationships. I was 30 when I divorced, then single for 8 years and only really short relationships. When my children were 8 and 9, I started dating. It lasted around 11 years. I thought it all was well, but his children interfered, and so we quit. Again, I was alone and had only short relations. There were many difficult moments. Now she has a new man. Then I turned 60, and one man snatched me in earnest. He even wanted to marry in the beginning, which she was clearly like, no. He started living too much besides me, although he kept his own flat in another town. So again, quite a high level of well-being. You have the possibility to have new flats. Now we are at the point that I try to push him out to his own place once in a while. Discussions don't tend to lead anywhere. Men don't speak about their emotions. I feel he's too close to my skin. He will be 74 next year, and I'm 70. And this is one of the really interesting things, I think for me. We know this from previous research on aging, that many women they want to have a companion, maybe for sex, maybe for company, maybe to go out on the boat in later life, if they have lost their previous companion or been single, but they actually don't want to get married. They don't want to have them too close to their skin. One research found that women want to have somebody to go out with, but not somebody to come home with. So, and I think this is really interesting from many points of view. I will return to that later, because in earlier life, in reproductive life, very often you found that marriage is what women want, especially if it's a good man. They do want to marry. Not always, of course, but still, why does this change? Then she also gives the example of another, her sister-in-law, who, I just put it because this is so Finland. She had been living, she's 77, she had a new partner of the same age, and he hit her once, and then she threw him out. And I emailed back to this woman and said, how did she throw him out? And she was just like, yeah, he called his son and said, come and fetch him tonight. And I mean, that's like from a Kaurismäki film, but out you go, and now she's all fine, and probably alcohol was involved in this domestic abuse thing, which she handled very strictly. Okay, to give you some stats about the background to these stories, if you look at divorce rates, as you know, part of the second demographic transition is both the legal and emotional ability and wish and possibility to divorce. Divorce rates have been coming up, and here we see for those who are 55 to 59 in selected countries, how many of them were divorced in the 70s? You see very few percentages, around 5 or below 5, and then the rise in very many countries. This is Finland, and the other Nordic countries would be almost as high. Finland has had very high divorce statistics, actually. Whereas then in some other countries, the lowest here are Egypt, Italy, Asian countries. So a very clear change that when we approach 2015, the rise is manifold. So you have the pool of people who have divorced is bigger. At the same time, widowhood is more rare. There have been fewer wars, and the gender gap in life expectancy has diminished. So if we look at here is an example from Finland. This was a situation in 1970, this in 2016. These are men, the green bars, and these are women. You see, for instance, here, if you were in your 70s, a big difference between the men and the women, and widowhood is prominent among women. Here, the gender difference is smaller. Those who are divorced are larger, and singlehood. So more singles, more divorced, fewer widows. Yep, and this we know also from previous research. The rates of first marriage and remarriage are growing in old age in Finland. Here we see for men and for women. This is now the most recent data, but still, of course, compared to the other parts of life, they are relatively small. Okay, here I just took the rates of remarriage, but for these older ones. Okay, what does this make me think of? Why do you think this is actually a very interesting situation? It makes me think of whales, killer whales, and some other kinds of whales which have really complicated names in English, who are the only other species we know for sure that also have menopause, which means that women live much longer than they can reproduce. I asked my biologist friends, do these have pair bonds in older life? I mean, if you go on living, do you have a pair bond? They were just like, oh, that's a really good question, but probably not, because these live in matrilineally bonded groups. So they live with their daughters and sons, and the sons go to other groups to mate. So they may not have pair bonds at all, as far as we know, because they live in separate groups. And anyway, also, at least for some species, the difference in life expectancy is really long. So the women, and especially the mothers, can live for 90 years, whereas the men die off at 45, 50. So you would really have to have a very, yeah. So it seems we may be the only species on Earth where we both have menopause, cessation of reproduction, and a long life after that, and at least for some, the ability and wish to form pair bonds, which raises the really interesting question of, in a way, why do we have it? Or do we have it as strong? Why do we still want to engage in this? What are the costs and benefits of having pair bonds at old age? So, some questions which arise from life history theory related to this. which I actually said. What is love at old age? We do know some fall in love. How does it feel? What are the differences to love at earlier ages? How do post-reproductive couple relations differ from those previously? Also, of course, we have many really interesting life course and previous research questions. I think one fascinating result in, I think James, one of James' papers, I don't remember who else was involved, was that when you looked at health outcomes, remarriage was worse for health even after controlling for all social and economic factors. So is it so that the meaning of marriage and the meaning of remarriage, or we know it varies if you have a longer life before and other things happening, but what exactly is going on? Okay, this was like the broad outline of what I think is interesting and fascinating and want to study. Now I give two short examples of our previous studies where we looked at the effects of remarriage more specifically. So now I forget cohabitation because so far we don't have good data on cohabitation for the elderly. The first one, yeah, I will not go through that. Just say more generally, obviously there are costs and benefits of remarriage. When you marry somebody, you can have, or actually maybe I will, you can maybe have more children, especially or if you are a man. You have more resources. You have another pair of hands, which I think has been really important, especially during history. There's a very nice study of Swedish orphans during a famine in the 19th century, where having a step-parent improved your survival rates. There's of course the care and company, but then as a minus side there's a potential conflict with especially the children and other things you have from before. Then of course these costs and benefits of remarriage are always context sensitive. It depends on the legal consequences, the social attitudes, the standard of living. Do you have, as in contemporary Finland, this opportunity to, for instance, keep your own flats and be very independent in that sense? And very crucially, I think, especially it seems for contemporary Western women who have more responsibility for care work, is this thought about, do I have to care for him in old age? Will he care for me? Again, do I want to come home from him if he is an old-fashioned guy who demands much maintenance and care and can talk about his emotions, as in the example of Anna. Okay, so two studies. One is with historical Finnish data, one is with the contemporary generational transmissions data. The first one I did in collaboration with a wonderful team of biologists in Turku who are studying human life histories and also elephant life histories. They thought elephants have menopause, but it turns out they don't. It's just really hard to find out whether they are menstruating or not and whether they have sex or not. But anyway, this was the Finnish study built on church book records from 4 parishes, so not nationally representative of local populations. And here we wanted to see how remarriage affected fertility, in the sense of how many children you had, how many children survived, and also how many grandchildren you had. The background of this study, I would say just shortly, was that especially in evolutionary psychology, you have all this talk about men who can reproduce, at older ages, and men always benefit from remarriage, but actually that's all, of course, a context-dependent thing, because if you fade a trade-off, if you have more children but you are a worse parent to them, they may not fare as well, and that may affect the number of grandchildren, as we saw in this study. In this historical population, you could remarry if you had become a widow, if your spouse had died only. No divorces here. Of those who had married at least once, the mean number of marriages was 1.2, so remarriage was not totally uncommon. Mean age at first marriage was quite high for being a poor agrarian population, 23 to 26. And mean age at first remarriage was 43 for men and 37 to 40 for women. And really interesting here is that we had also basically two classes, the landowners as the wealthy and the landless as the poorer. The poor women were the least likely to remarry and the least likely to remarry a much younger spouse, whereas the rich women and all kinds of men were more likely to remarry, and everybody married younger spouses, which is actually interesting. Then when we looked at the effects of remarriage, I'm going to give you all the outcomes, but for children, we found that men who remarried had more children. Not very surprising because they remarried a bit younger females and had more children. However, for the women, there's actually a slight trend, but not statistically significant, of also having a bit more children when they remarry. And for both men and women, once we look at the numbers of grandchildren, there's a trend there, but it's not statistically significant. So in the long run, they had more children, but these children were less likely to survive and to go on and have children themselves. So there's actually neither a benefit to fertility nor a drawback to fertility from remarrying. And I think this is actually a very interesting result. Unfortunately, we have few similar studies from other more traditional populations. Because if there would be a huge drawback, if throughout human history women who remarried, all their grandchildren died, then you would probably have had a selection for that maybe better not to get infatuated when you are 60 and go on voting trips and because it's not good for your fertility. But at least in this one population, no, it didn't add it, but it didn't detract from it. So it may more be that, yeah, it's a context-dependent thing, and at least we have the capacity to fall in love is still there, also after menopause. Yeah, so these were the main results. Are you happy with that? Now comes the final new thing. We go to contemporary Finland. This is another take on the subject, and but with the data that we are now collecting the third wave for. Here we use the wave 2 data. Here we wanted to see how partnership transitions in the older generation, which is the Finnish baby boomer generation, born in 45 to 50, how they are related to what we call grandparental investment. It means all the things grandparents do for their grandchildren, financial support, contact with the parents of the grandchildren. Here I will show contact with grandchildren and provided grandchild care among those who have younger grandchildren, younger than 12 years. Contact we measured as, this is a standard thing also in share, how often are you in contact live or by phone or internet, actually now. And it's a gliding and normally distributed scale from never to several times a week. Care we dichotomized for several reasons, so it's whether they had provided any grandparent care at all to a grandchild who is below 12. And then we compared those who had married once and stayed married, who were widowed and had not remarried, who were divorced and had not remarried, and who were either widowed or divorced and had remarried. We couldn't separate these two because the numbers were so small, because few remarried, as you saw earlier. Then we also actually checked how the timing of these transitions affect these contributions grandparents give, it does not affect, so I will not show them. And we control for a wide range of things, health and working status and education and lineage and numbers of children and grandchildren and emotional closeness to the child also. No, to the own child, who is the grandchild's parent. Okay, what we found, I will actually first give you, you're probably tired at this point, first give you the conclusions, then we can go to the slides. Remarriage was for both men and women associated with less contacts with the grandchild and less provision of grandchild care. Among grandfathers, also divorce took down these things. So here you see for contact frequencies, here are the remarriage. So the trend goes, here's for grandfathers, here is for grandmothers, here the divorce is no. So compared to married, these are significant, being married and not separated and being remarried. The other ones are not statistically significant, except here for grandfathers divorce also. So quite interesting effect of divorce here in this, that's for, and grandchild care, a bit similar, although they are, yeah, actually quite similar. And again, I think with men, we know part of the story here. We know that men, for many reasons, tend to lose contact with kin and other family members, including their own other children and their grandchildren, when the kind of female, his wife, is gone. Whereas with women, I don't have the full story. I don't know what happens when she remarries, but clearly there's a potential trade-off there. That, I mean, at least from the point of view of the grandchild's parents, they are maybe not very happy that she invests less, or maybe there are other pathways that, as we know, there can be many things. But I would be happy to hear your views on what's going on with the women. Why, when as a woman you remarry, are you investing less in your grandchildren? Okay, super tentative conclusions. New partnerships in later life are still a very modest trend. It's interesting to think about how high they can go, how much will people form new relationships. How much do they want to do this? How much is there an opportunity to do this, given health and sex ratios and other concerns? We need better data on remarriages. Remarriage is starting with that, but then, so it's really annoying in the UN marital database, you just have married, but you don't know if they are remarried or, I mean, that's a very different thing, as we know from all research. Being first time married or remarried, and especially cohabitation and dating, which we will be working on. We saw some effects of remarriage in different types of Finnish populations, and we will be looking at this now in our project with the longitudinal data, both from share and from the generational transfers things. And very tentatively, one could, I think that the preference for, if you have a partner, what do you wish for to have from him? And I take the woman's perspective, dating, living apart together, cohabitation or remarriage. They probably depend both on the resource flows of money and of care within the couple, and then on the previous family histories, the existing children and grandchildren. And I'll finish with a quote from Merja, who said she is 60, has been cohabiting, and she says, I don't know if our relationship will last to the end. I don't know if I want to take care of him, or if he wants to take care of me. And then she says, very touchingly, I think that, and honestly, that I know in his heart I am not the most important one. And also she says, for me, I have my children and grandchildren, in a way they are closer than he is. But still, we have a very good relationship and we do many important things together, so let's see where this all ends. Thank you very much. Here you see Lenka Krenkova, Mirka Danielskakka, and Antti Tanskanen, who contributed to this.